Bob Mintzer. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Sean. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right.
Good.
In the pre-roll, I was mentioning that I'll probably feel quite a bit better in about 3 or 4 weeks after
Mm,
certain current events slow down.
right.
And even better than that, I'll feel great when this pandemic is over.
Amen.
So, so we can get to getting back out in front of an audience. I have
Yes.
to say that's the thing I missed the most.
Agreed.
Yeah. So how are you doing?
Well, doing what's in front of me, trying to make the best out of this current situation. I teach full-time at the University of Southern California Thornton School of Music and the jazz program. And, we're trying to keep the students engaged and interested and moving forward. It's been a challenge, but we're all learning a lot. I think it's going as well as can be expected. When you consider what we do typically is get in a room together and play music.
Yeah.
And then we go out and we get in front of an audience and play music. So
Right.
little or none of that is happening at the moment. So it's different for sure.
Uh, I teach at Ohio State,
Hmm.
and this thing didn't hit Ohio as hard as it hit other places in the country. And there's also, I mean, however you want to look at it, it might be a positive thing that the politics are such that in Ohio that it's harder to get people to shut stuff down.
Right.
They're just not going to they're just not going to do it just
Hmm.
because of safety. There has to be some other stuff,
Right.
some other stuff in there.
Right.
Um, Now, granted, we're following all the protocols and all the mandates and everything, but we've actually been able to rehearse our big bands, and our combos.
Mm.
And then some of our classes are hybrid. So if it has like a lab component, like an
Right.
improvisation class or something, I'm doing that 50-50. So I'll teach one, through like a Zoom session where I'm
Right.
doing a lot of talking theory and stuff. Matter of fact, today we were talking about Tom Harrell's tune "Sail Away."
Oh, that's a beautiful thing. I played
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Mhm.
And then we'll meet one time in person.
Uh-huh.
And the class size, this particular class is an advanced improvisation class, so there's not as many students as would be in like an improv one class.
Okay.
And we have rooms that are big enough so that we can get the what is it, 10 feet apart, distance
Right.
and all of that. It's weird with saxophone though, like the brass, they have those covers over the bell,
Right.
and they're a little more directioner, but you also get this sort of spittle, right?
Yeah.
So there's not really any science on that. Well,
Yeah.
I suppose in their studies they factored that in, but it just seems like that would be harder to account for than what's coming out of the bell.
Right.
But with saxophone, it's coming out everywhere, right?
Pretty much. Yeah, it is. Look, I mean, we know, I've been teaching in university settings for over 35 years, and young people they maybe don't take as good care of themselves as they should, and they get run down, and they're excited about being in school and hanging out and working hard. And at least at USC, it's just been a petri dish for the flu and all sorts of germs. So
Yeah.
taking that into consideration, I think they did the right thing. I mean, of course, it was contingent on state mandate in California,
Right,
but
right, right.
I'm relieved, I have to say, because um, these kids would come in and they wouldn't sleep enough and wouldn't eat right, and one would get sick and it would start spreading. And
Oh yeah.
one can only imagine what would happen with COVID, if that were to explode.
And it's not just COVID by itself, right? So it's the regular flu season too. So
Yeah.
now you have kind of a, yeah, it's a different time. It's a different time.
Certainly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's talk about music. That always seems to make me feel better.
Yeah, please.
So Bob, tell us about yourself, where you're from, where you grew up, and what your childhood was like. Maybe something about like the kind of music that was happening around your house when when you were growing up.
Right. I grew up in New Rochelle, New York, which is a suburb of New York City, just a couple of communities up from the New York City border in the Bronx. My mother was a school teacher. My dad was an accountant. Your typical middle class family. New Rochelle was an interesting place to grow up. It was a microcosm in a way of what New York City was like, just considerably smaller. There were a lot of different ethnic groups mixing there, and consequently, you heard different kinds of music. I grew up, being close to New York. I grew up hearing rhythm and blues and Motown and rock and roll and jazz and classical music and Afro-Cuban music. I think music called me at a very early age. There was something about the way my brain was wired that made me really pay attention to music when I heard it. And my first exposure to music was on radio, television. My folks, were not avid music fans, but they had a couple of long-playing records around the house. I remember they had this Sergio Mendes Brazil 66 record that I wore out. There was just something about that music, that group, the arrangements, which happened to be Dave Grusin, that just really sucked me in. And I listened incessantly to this one record. Your typical sort of generic white middle-class Jewish family show tunes. I don't know. It's pretty nondescript. Anyway, I went through music programs in school, and the rock and roll craze hit, the Beatles hit, and I really wanted to play guitar. I wanted to be a rock and roller, and this was before I was exposed to jazz music. So I was playing guitar and piano. By the way, there was a piano in our house, and that was a real important component of my musicianship because I would spend hours at the piano trying to figure out songs by ear that I had heard on the radio or on television. So I was like right from the get-go involved with melody, harmony, rhythm, polyphony, all that came into play very early on, and I'm very grateful that that was the case. It's such a critical part of what we do as saxophonists, as composers, arrangers, musicians. Anyway, when I was in garage bands, I started playing some weddings and small gigs that way. Started playing the saxophone in 8th, 9th grade, I want to say. 10th and 11th grade, playing with local musicians, learning on my own. My senior year of high school, I got to go to Interlochen Arts Academy, an arts high school out in Michigan. That was really the turning point in my musical career, in that it was a firsthand view of what sort of commitment would be involved to really become, a consummate musician, because everybody there was bearing down and, practicing 4 hours a day and really consumed with their art. So, I saw that. It was like, oh, okay. So that's what you do. And, also there were teachers there that really pushed you and said, look, this is, I remember my clarinet teacher saying, you didn't practice enough. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, how much did you practice? I said, an hour. He said, no. You got to practice 4 hours. And it was like, ooh.
Thank you so much for watching my video so far. If you'd like to support, there are several ways to do so below. Also, likes are free. Please comment, share, and subscribe. Now back to the video.
And so I really, at that point, was able to establish, sensible practice and study habits that carried over into when I went to conservatory. So I went to Hart College of Music in Hartford, Connecticut for a couple of years. Jackie McLean was there, but I was a clarinet student. I was a clarinet major. So I played in the symphony orchestra, a lot of chamber music, which was great, by the way. And then when I left school, I'd go home and put on records and play along to jazz records, and started hanging out with the local jazz musicians and playing with them a little bit. Well, Jackie at a certain point told me I need to go to New York because that's where the scene was. So I moved down to New York, transferred to Manhattan School of Music, and started hanging out in New York, and going to sessions and lofts and playing little gigs. And let's see, right out of Manhattan School of Music, I got a gig with a fellow named Ymir Deodato, he was on the CTI label at the time, had a relatively popular record and had a touring band. So I jumped on the road, did that for a minute, then got in the Tito Puente Orchestra. And shortly thereafter, this would have been 1974. Then in 75, I joined the Buddy Rich Band, spring of 75. And I was in heaven, man. I had a steady gig, was traveling the world, getting to play every night. And I did that for 2.5 years. And I learned how to write and arrange on Buddy's band. I mean, it was unheard of, really. I mean, I had never studied arranging, and I wrote my first 6 or 7 big band pieces for Buddy. And he was amazing. He was so supportive and encouraging, and he played anything I wrote. And I was like a kid in a candy shop. It was like, let's see, how would I like to play with Buddy? Like what kind of groove does he really play well, in my humble opinion? So like a shuffle, right? I thought, man, I want to write a shuffle for Buddy. So, I wrote with him in mind, thinking he should be happy. It's his band. And I also wrote in a way that would somehow include me as a soloist. And I learned a very important thing back then, because I was a second tenor player. The first tenor player got most of the solos. But when I started writing, I wrote second tenor solos in all my arrangements. So after a while, I was playing as much or sometimes even more than the first tenor player. So that was some serious training right there, just to play every night. That was irreplaceable.
No, we've all heard these stories about Buddy Rich. Most of the sort of cussing the band out stories.
Yep.
But it sounds like your experience with them was more, as you said, supportive.
He cussed the band out. I don't know that he ever cussed me out directly. I don't think so. I think he really appreciated anyone that was there in earnest to really play. And because, man, he could really play. He was not fooling around. And if you were the least bit hesitant or drank too much or not totally 100% in, you were going to hear about it. So, I mean, whether it was misperceived or not, I figured I'm there to learn how to play, and I'm there to write, and I'm here to travel the world and make a name for myself. So let him yell. Basically, I mean, I eventually came to that conclusion.
Right. So I want to share with you some of my first experiences with your work, with your playing. So it's one of those GRP All-Star Big Band recordings. I think that's the first time that I heard you. And I'll tell you a little story about that recording. There was a dollar store, and so this was when I was in high school. There was a dollar store, around the corner from, well, it wasn't exactly around the corner. It was a little ways away from my house.
Okay.
And my dad discovered this dollar store that had stacks of CDs and cassette tapes. And it was a bunch of like heavy hip stuff, and it was all like $1 a piece. Mm-hmm. So we got that, and it was an unusual dollar store. It was like a clearinghouse kind of thing, where whoever was buying stuff for this store, they just knew what they were doing. And it wasn't just like, like clever, sophisticated jazz stuff, but it was also like, sunglasses and a bunch of other stuff, but it was like, higher end kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, we go in there and I found, what is it? The Eddie Daniels recording Memos from Paradise. It was on cassette. What else? What was it? The Charlie Parker, what was it? To Bird with Love or something? I can't remember. That was in there. The GRP, All-Star Big Band, that was in there. And a bunch of other stuff that I can't even recall right now. But, I ran home and I started listening to that recording. It was a great recording. It's just like the best band on earth or something. It was just incredible. And then I'm reading and everything. I was like, oh, okay, who's this guy, Bob Mintzer? Let me check this guy out. And so I told my dad, and he had a buddy that had, well, no, I think he bought some records, and one of the record he bought was Incredible Journey. Mm-hmm. And, we put that on a cassette, and I have to tell you, I burned a hole in that cassette. I listened to that thing so much. And by that time, I was in college, and I was doing a lot of driving because I went to Western Michigan University. Mm-hmm. But my parents' house was only like an hour and 15 minutes away. So every weekend I drove back home because I'm just a homebody and I just miss my family and stuff. And I had that thing playing the whole time, just constantly.
Must have drove your parents crazy.
Oh no. Just, and I can still hear it in my head. It was one of those formative recordings for me. Incredible Journey was. And then of course, fast forward a little bit, and the Jocko birthday concert, and you and Michael Brecker going at it, on Invitation in particular. And then there's that Twin Tenors recording you guys did, which I frequently listen to that still. I love the different arrangements on Giant Steps, and I typically borrow the harmony line off of one of those arrangements when I'm playing with another horn player. So anyhow, I mean, you've been quite influential, my writing, my musicianship, the fact that you're a multi-instrumentalist, playing the bass clarinet the way that you do. I've got a bass clarinet. It's back there beside the Barry, mm-hmm. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
No, you're very welcome.
Thank you for that.
It's been like the CD says, an incredible journey. Let me just maybe just put things in the proper chronology. So I played with Buddy from 75 to 77. Then 78, I joined the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Big Band, mm-hmm. and played with Thad for 6, 8, 9 months. He moved to Europe, and I stayed out with Mel for a short time till around 1980. And then 81, I joined Jocko's word of mouth band. 81, 82, played with Jocko. Then 83, started my own big band and started recording. Did one record in Japan for CBS Sony called Popalypse. And then we did Incredible Journey. I think it was released in 1985. And pretty much almost every year subsequently, I did a new CD. So that's 85. So 5 years later, 1990 is when I met the Yellow Jackets, and I played on a record called Greenhouse. And that was sort of the beginning of that relationship. And that's now a 30-year stretch, which is hard to believe. But, having sort of this dual life, doing the big band thing, being triple really, educator, and then being a member of the Yellow Jackets. And then, as if that weren't enough, then about 5 years ago, I signed on as the chief conductor of the WDR Big Band in Cologne, Germany. So until this pandemic started, I was going over there some 40 days out of the season. So it's been a wild ride. Very grateful.
Yeah, and we're grateful for all your work, man. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
So, so I didn't actually start digging into the Yellow Jacket stuff until later, and I think that it was the Jocko stuff that I heard you on that sort of opened me up to that, because honestly, especially when I went to college, I was like this purist. It was like, oh, it's gotta swing, it's gotta be an acoustic bass player. I was into that whole thing. I think my conception was not much different than sort of like Wynton in that time period. It was kind of like, that was kind of who I was listening to. As far as I was listening to his playing, but as far as his conception about music and his angle on music, I was pretty influenced by that. But I think the Yellow Jackets was a way for me to kind of break some of that up and to get a little more opened up to other kind of stuff. So what is it like playing in that band? I know that's a really broad kind of general question, but
no problem. I can answer that very succinctly. I like to say it's the band you always wanted to be in, particularly as a saxophone player. First of all, it's a partnership band. There's no leader. So you have quite a substantial investment in terms of being a composer, arranger, decision maker, producer. You can play whatever you want. It's a true democracy, and it's wonderful. It just feels so comfortable. And touring, which can be a very grueling, rigorous thing, is always a joy, because you're hanging out with these wonderful people, and we get along splendidly, and we get to play this amazing music every night. And just to back up a little, I have to be totally honest. I did not listen to the Yellow Jackets when they first hit the scene. So when I got a call in 1990, I really hadn't done my homework yet. I hadn't really checked them out. They called me to just fly out to LA and play on a record that was to become a CD called Greenhouse. And our son had just been born. He was 1 year old. And I just thought, I don't know if I'm ready to, go on the road, particularly with this band. And then Russ Ferrante sent me a demo tape of the music, and it was like, wait a minute, it first of all, it defied categorization. It was so unique sounding and unusual. I hadn't heard anything quite like that before. And I thought, I better check this out a little more carefully. And as I went back and listened to some of their older records, I realized there's such craftsmanship in those recordings. Everyone played so great. Ricky Lawson and Jimmy Haslip, and Russ is a brilliant musician, and Mark Russo. And I just thought, wow, this is really something. I mean, I think it's always important, and it was important for me to realize I need to sort of get inside music before I pass judgment on it, And I think it's fairly common. Sean, I've ran into guys on the trail that said, "Oh yeah, you're playing with the Yellow Jackets, huh? Making that big money, huh?" Which, first of all, was not true at all. It was not big money. It's never been big money. It's been totally about the music. I wish it was big money, but it's just not. But there's you really have to go beyond the surface thing and see what the content is. It's too easy to dismiss a band like the Yellow Jackets as like smooth jazz, or something. Like, wait, no, it's not.
No, it definitely ain't that.
No, it's not. I mean, look, there are elements of many different kinds of music there. There's R&B and gospel, certainly. Russ grew up in the church. His father was very active in the church. His whole family was. So there's that element there. Will Kennedy's from Oakland, California. There's that whole Oakland funk thing that gives it a certain personality. I come from trad jazz, not trad, but traditional, straight ahead jazz, as well as, everything else. So we're all, very broad-minded musicians, and we don't think in terms of genre or category. We think in terms of putting notes together that would facilitate the four of us striking up a conversation. And that's it, So I think what happens is the music, sort of extends over boundaries, defies categorization, and sounds like the Yellow Jackets.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion. It belongs to me.
So what was it about music? You said something about music appealed to you. Your brain was wired, it was just wired for music. What is it about music? What was it that really turned you on, that that caused you to know without a doubt that this is what you wanted your career to be, and that this is how you could make your mark on the world? What was it about music that communicated all that?
Well, what I was referring to when talking about the way my brain is wired, I think it's wired in such a way where I pay attention to music, and I have perfect pitch, and I can really discern the detail in music, and like it or not, wanting to or not, I just start analyzing what I'm hearing. In fact, there's a funny thing that happens when the Yellow Jackets, we go out to a restaurant, we're on the road. We might be in a restaurant and like some really dumb commercial music from some part of the world is playing, and we're all listening to it. We're trying to talk, but part of our brains are being sucked into the speakers, and we're listening and analyzing that music.
Yeah.
And I think it's just it's something about the wiring. You're able to discern pitches and their relationships, and you just go there and start to kind of figure out what it is that's happening. So that said, it was really interesting to me to go, oh, so that's why that sounds like that. If I could emulate it on the piano, then I could sort of see what it was. But beyond that, I also was very taken by the emotional content in music, just the feeling it gave me. It gave me this sense of joy, of connectivity, of spirituality, just celebration. So all those things were just very invigorating and, enlightening in a certain way. But in terms of knowing that I would do this for a career, I had no clue. I wasn't even thinking in those terms. I knew that I was very interested in this. I loved doing it. I loved those fleeting moments when I really connected musically and everything lined up, as I would say, the molecules lined up, and I had a moment of, clarity and bliss musically. Yeah. I just thought, I want to do that. I want to do that. I don't know if I'll be successful. I don't know if I'll make any money at it. I mean, that really wasn't even a consideration early on.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I've described it before as saying that I'm stuck with music. It wouldn't matter if it made money or not. I don't know that I could do anything else and not be totally miserable. The thing that you were talking about, how when music goes on, it's hard to have listen to anybody else talking. It's like the music sort of draws your attention, and I have this conversation with my wife frequently, because she'll do this thing because she can use music to relax and go to sleep too, and I can't do that, because if it's loud enough for me to really hear, then my brain is dissecting the music. But then if it's a little bit too soft for me to really discern what's going on, then it's just irritating. Then it's like, I want you to turn it up so I can hear what this is going on, or we need to just turn this off, right? Branford said that he doesn't listen for pleasure, and I think what he means by that, and what I mean by that when I say that, is that it's hard for me to hear a piece of music and not have my brain, trying to figure out, or trying to connect, things. Or like hearing something and being like, I really like that. I might want to use that somewhere. It's hard for me to not do that. But and my wife is musical. She's a dancer, but before she was a dancer, she was a musician, and her mother was a musician. And but I think her relationship to music is different. She loves music, of course. Who doesn't love music? I've heard. Have you ever encountered someone that actually would admit that, I hate music?
I think maybe our president.
I would be surprised by that.
There's been no music in the White House. None. Sorry, maybe you want to cut that out.
No, you don't have to cut it out. That's funny. That's hilarious.
It's ridiculous. But there you go.
Yeah. But I have heard. I don't know. I was watching something on late night television or something. It must have been like on a dating show or something, one of those old dating shows. And, each person was describing, themselves and who they were and stuff. And the guy actually said, "I hate music." And then that was the end for him, because nobody wanted to deal with him, because who hates music?
He must have had a terrible childhood. That's
Right. I mean, how can you hate music? But, I will say, though, too, is now the contrast to that is this sort of, and especially, young people, my students, there's this wide open, what kind of music do you like? Oh, I like everything. I like, this, and I like that, and I like everything. Okay, well, what is it about that music that you love? Well, it's just, I like the energy, and I like, I just like a lot of different stuff. It's like, okay, well, name an album from this artist that you say you like. Well, I don't know if I can name an album
Well, you know why,
per
don't you?
se.
Because they downloaded one tune off of
Right.
iTunes, and they don't even know what else is on the album, probably.
Right. Yeah, and this music, I don't know, when I put a CD out, I wrestle over the order that the songs are going to be in, because I want them to be, I want them to be listened to in that order. It's like a story I'm trying to tell, right? Mm-hmm. And to kind of take them out of order, I understand, I understand, if you want to get stuff played on the record, I'm sorry, on the radio, then obviously, I get that in commercialism and everything. But I think there is something to that old sort of kind of classical, music approach to listening to music, where if you're going to play a piece, you have to play all of the movements.
Yeah, or listen to the whole recording, but there's sort of an oversupply of product out there. And, I think just on commercial basis, it makes more sense for people to be able to download, like purchase one song, right? Yeah. Versus the whole recording. And whereas, when I was a kid, you went out and you bought an LP, and there was maybe 40 some odd minutes total. So there were 20 minutes of music on each side. But like you say, there was a continuity. You listen to the whole side. You listen to whatever, 3 or 4 songs, and you turn it over, listen to those 3 or 4 songs, and you would wear that thing out and That's learn. Right. I would learn every note on an LP. But now people aren't even buying CDs hardly anymore. Everything is a download or not even. I mean, there's, they get on a streaming service, and yep. You're kind of at the mercy of whoever determines what music is put on there. It might not even be your best work that's put on Apple Music or Spotify or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, it's a different thing. That whole Napster thing came through and sort of wrecked house.
Yeah.
And then, of course, combine that with social media and all of the free ways that people can share their own content. I mean, Instagram and, Facebook and all the different ways that people are sharing music. It's a totally different ballgame. On the one hand, I guess we can say, well, it's a level playing field now, right? So like everybody can put stuff out there. But on the other hand, you don't have the sort of gatekeepers that are sort of controlling the quality of the stuff that is coming out there.
Or never forget about getting paid for any of it. But, I guess the trade-off is you can cultivate an audience using social media, which is what most of our young players today do, as well as older players. That's sort of the mode of communication these days. But it's not like, in the old days, you would sell, the Yellow Jackets would sell a fair number of CDs, and, there'd be publishing royalties and so on. But that's all kind of evaporated for the unless you had a very high level, sort of pop artist level. So I find people, musicians they're sort of looking elsewhere and, trying to cultivate some source of income. It's mostly live playing, which really is problematic now, being that that's been so impacted by this pandemic. But all the social media stuff and giving away your stuff for free is all leading towards being able to go out and gather a crowd together and, do a run of gigs, which is great. Then you can sell your CDs at the gigs. In fact, right now, the Yellow Jackets probably sell most of their CDs at their performances.
So now you've played with so many, you've written for so many, you've you've been involved with so many creative projects over the years. Are there some? I'm sure that there are, but are there some that stand out or were sort of pivotal moments that caused you to go in a different direction, and that maybe that you think back on, like, you know, if that would have been different, then maybe this other thing didn't happen?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think every musical setting I was in had a major impact in one way or another.
Right.
You know, as a player, as a professional musician, how to conduct yourself, you know, as a team player, as a soloist, you know, as a conceptualist. You know, you pick up things as you go, and you know, and then you put all these ideas together to, you know, do your own thing, or, you know, either individually or in the case of the Yellow Jackets, collectively, you know, because that's a very collaborative effort. We all write individually, but then we get together and, you know, everybody is free to interpret as they will. And it becomes very clear 4 heads are better than one. So, you know, on one hand, you're relinquishing control of your song to the committee, but generally what comes out is far better than what you yourself may have thought up. So it's very cool. But it's just, you know, man, how do you learn how to play? You go out and play, you know?
Right.
I mean, you practice and develop certain foundational skills, then you got to get out there and play. And in real time, you start putting the notes together and figuring out not only what to play, but how to integrate what you're playing with the people you're playing with. And then, you know, just you pick up little things and you have an opportunity to do your own thing. And so you sort of gather together your influences and write some music thinking about what it is you're trying to convey, you know, philosophically, you know, abstractly through the music, and who you want to do it with. And that really informs what it's like, what it sounds like, what it feels like. And you just, you know, from each subsequent experience, you get a little more adept at, you know, doing what you're doing.
So, my biggest influences are Sonny Stitt, John Coltrane, and Paquito de Rivera. Those are probably my biggest influences. And the more that I think about it, it's probably the case that the people that I've played with over the years have been a bigger influence than them, you know, because it's not just a matter of playing frequently. It's also a matter of having conversation, and in many situations actually being able to, like, have conversations and talk about what it was that was going on musically, right? Things that might still be question marks to, you know, folks like Coltrane or something that, you know, I can't dialogue with. Who have been especially early influences for you on your saxophone playing in particular?
Well, I mean, overall, you know, Miles Davis was a huge influence. I mean, I couldn't wait for the next Miles record to come out back in the 60s. You know, we all waited with bated breath to see what he was going to do next. And around that time, mid to late 60s into the 70s, you know, he was changing up rather dramatically. So we were all very excited to see what he was going to do next. Of course, Coltrane, you know, he had already passed by the time I started checking him out. But, you know, just I you know, heard the records, the Impulse records from the early mid 60s. And then I heard the later records that got, you know, sort of more into the free realm. And then I went back and checked out the Prestige recordings when Train was with Miles.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, working, steaming, relaxing, and, you know, started working on those. So it was just, you know, it was an exploration. Coltrane, Miles, Thelonious Monk, Herbie Hancock, always really grabbed my attention. Just his piano playing, his composing, the records he made, the way he played in Miles' band was just extraordinary. That period, 64, was just incredible. The band, I love the band with George Coleman and Ron and Tony and Herbie and Miles, and then later Wayne Shorter. Just extraordinary music that to this day, I still marvel at and loved listening to. Sonny Stitt, I got to hear play in New York a lot. He's a great player, always was a great player. Hank Mobley was just a fantastic, I could call him like the Mozart of jazz. Is just so eloquent the way he would phrase and swinging and great sound. And so George Coleman, I love. He was, to me, the consummate changes player. He would finesse chord changes and just play the most subtle and interesting things over, harmonic structures. Wayne Shorter was great. Michael Brecker was somebody I was friendly with, associated with, was told to sound like in the New York studios. Yeah, can you play a solo like Mike Brecker? Yeah, okay. But, even going back, I loved Lester Young's playing. There was just something so lyrical and beautiful about the way he played. And, he changed a lot too, right? I don't know what the influences were, but in the early days when he was on the Basie band, like in the 30s and 40s, man, he was blowing up a storm. He had a lot of energy and then later, when he started working with Billie Holiday, everything, it got sort of a little more subdued and slowed down, but no less great, But I don't know, his playing really resonated with me. I love Ben Webster, certainly, Coleman Hawkins. Paul Gonzalez, really an interesting player. I never tried that hard to emulate him, but I've always been intrigued by the way he plays. Just such a between the notes kind of player, and a lot of cool sounds and effects and, with articulation and pitch, and just really interesting. God, Eddie Lockjaw Davis, great player, the Texas tenor guys, were just wonderful. There's, so many. Anybody that's anybody that made a statement, I felt, I was interested in, and I would check out,
Yeah, thank you for doing that in detail. I think that is a great lesson for young musicians. I think there is a strong tendency to go to a particular artist, get stuck on that artist, and not do one's homework. Who did that artist listen to? Who did they study? Check that person out. Who did that person study? Check that person out. Everybody loves, Chris Potter, for instance, and you have a lot of saxophone players, young saxophone players that are so taken by Chris. But if you actually talk to Chris, he will tell you, you got to listen to, this long list of guys, right? And he'll tell you who the guys to listen to. And, but yeah, so I appreciate you doing that.
I got to say, I have to confess, I made that mistake when I was younger. In New York, everybody was really a Coltrane and Joe Henderson, Sonny Rollins devotee. Yeah. And so I got on the Buddy Rich band, and I stood up a couple of times to solo, and Buddy ran up on me and told me to stop playing that Coltrane, S-H-I-T. And I was sort of taken aback, I was like, wow, what does he mean by that? And the next night after the gig, he came over to me and he handed me a cassette. And it was a recording of Lester Young, Buddy, and Nat Cole. It's a famous recording. There was no bass player on that session. He just said, here, check this out. And, we were on the road. We were traveling quite a lot, so I had a lot of time to listen. And I started listening to that recording. I went, you know what? He's right. I mean, there's, I need to infuse some of that older sound into my playing. And in fact, that's what Coltrane did. Coltrane didn't just
Right.
like pop out of the womb going, I mean, he was very influenced by Lester Young.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a Downbeat interview where the interviewer asked Coltrane who his three most important influences were, and they were Lester Young, Dexter Gordon, and you'll never guess the third one.
Um,
Or maybe you will.
I don't know, Sidney Bechet or something.
No, although that could have been an influence, but the third one was Stan Getz.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
which
interesting.
really was
That is
interesting to
interesting.
me.
That is
But anyway,
interesting.
yeah. So again, I'm forever grateful to Buddy Rich for pulling my coat. That for playing the sort of faux Coltrane kind of sounding saxophone, where I hadn't really done the homework. And so I went out and bought a whole bunch of Lester Young records, and then and then that sort of branched out. I started listening to Ben Webster, Coleman Hawkins, Ike Quebec, a beautiful saxophone player who was a A&R guy at Blue Note, made only a couple of records, And,
You dig Tina Brooks?
yes, great player. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a lot of names, and if you really want to know what know this music, you got to spend a lot of time, and that's just what it is. Okay, so you have a project, a brand new project just about to come out, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You want to talk about it?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about it. Also, like to play something from it if I could.
Yeah, that's excellent, man.
So I've been the chief conductor of this WDR big band in Cologne, Germany, for the last 5 years, and I've as soon as I started there, I knew that this would be a wonderful pairing to have the Yellow Jackets go over there and do something with this band, because it's two really strong entities. That band over in Germany, they're playing together all year long. They play together really well. I know them. I've written for them. I've worked with them a lot. And the Yellow Jackets, sort of same situation. So I thought, let's get this together. And then, we were always thinking about subsequent recording projects. And I thought, well, why don't we do a CD with the WDR Big Band and the Yellow Jackets, and maybe, pick some of the signature tunes from the last 40 years and reinvent them, or just, freshen up the arrangements. So I did new arrangements for a bunch of these tunes, and we wrote a couple of new tunes. So anyway, this tune is this is one of the new tunes, and it's called One Day. So let me share it with you.
Yeah, man. Killing, killing, killing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I saw at least part of that. I may have. I think I saw uh, maybe a couple minutes of that. It was part of the reason why I got in touch with you
Mm-hmm.
to do this interview. I wanted to, if I can use my platform to help it all, promote your project. I wanted to do that, and selfishly, I wanted to get you on my program. So that's
Mm-hmm.
great.
I appreciate it. Much
Yeah,
appreciated.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and so I have a deep question for you.
Okay.
Do you have any hobbies?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Um, I like to cook. I like to read. I like to go hiking. Um, I like watching old movies.
Mm.
Um, used to like to ski, cross country and downhill ski. I'm not doing it quite so much as I once did, but that I love that. In fact, on a Yellow Jackets tour a couple of winters ago, we were in Colorado and we were at, I think, Beaver Creek. I was like, man, I got to get out there. So I got up real early and went out and did some downhill skiing. It was great, you know. But I like walking. I like hiking. There's some beautiful hikes out in California. Um, love to read. Love to learn new things and learn about people, learn about the way people think.
Hmm.
And I like to eat well. So consequently, I've learned how to cook and make things that are good to eat. Not only you know good tasting, but things that are good for you. So I guess it's another hobby, just really being healthy. That's I think it's so critical for anybody, but particularly a musician, a traveling musician. I mean, there were, when things are sort of working normally, I'm on the road maybe 5, 6 months out of the year. And particularly when you're doing one-nighters, it can be very grueling. You got to be in good shape. And, I make a hobby out of eating well, sleeping well, and thinking well, and I, you know, the, I love, when I travel, I'm reading, I'm studying music, I'm writing music, I'm sightseeing. I'll go out to a museum when I'm in a big city somewhere. I just try to really do meaningful things in my life. I guess that's my hobbies.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a really good way to stay out of trouble. You know, I mean, I know that, you know, I'm involved with a lot of things other than just music. Fitness has been something
Hmm.
that,
That too. I forgot about that one.
yeah. So I was training more like a bodybuilder for years, and now I'm training more like a power lifter. And
Hmm.
I have a goal in mind with my bench press,
Hmm.
and I have a few years left where I can try to challenge that goal. Um, you know, uh, I probably don't want to be putting up the kind of weight or have to weigh as much as I have to weigh in order to put up the kind of weight that I want to. Too much beyond probably 50. You know, I'm 46 now,
Hmm.
and so I figure I have about 4 years to hit some goals, and then after that, I'm always going to be in the gym, and I'm always going to be, doing that. You know, my dad, it was something my dad instilled in all of his kids, was just the expectation to be, active, to be doing something, to be moving around, you know.
Hmm.
And so we did exercises before we went to bed every night.
Wow.
Calisthenics, push-ups,
Uh-huh.
set-ups, those kind of things. And my son is 7, and so I have him doing that. You know, I want him to, you know, have that expectation, to keep himself in motion. Now he's high energy, so he was going to be in motion anyway. So for him, it might just be to burn off some energy.
Right. Yeah. 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 I'm glad you mentioned the exercise thing. I mean, I exercise every morning, and I have a routine I do. It takes about 45 minutes. Push-ups, sit-ups, running in place, stretches, chins on the bathroom door, just getting every muscle group and getting my heart pumping. And I do that religiously, no matter where I am. I don't have to go to a gym. I just roll out of bed and hit it. And then, I'm good to go, you know.
That's what's up. Yeah. There are too many musicians in poor physical health. Because they just don't do anything active. Yeah, right. Because they just don't do anything active. I think it's particularly a lot of artists that way, because if you're going to get any good as an artist, you have to sit in one place for a lot of hours a day, and it can promote, not doing anything else other than just sitting around. Yeah. But it seems like there's a growing number of folks that are musicians that are, I think, starting to, get interested in stuff like running and weight training and all kinds of different things, calisthenics and all of that. And of course, the big one, which is the one that I struggle with the most, is eating healthy. The kitchen is undefeated. I mean, you can do all of the other stuff, all of the physical stuff, but if you're putting terrible stuff in your body,
that is true.
There's not much that you can do to overcome that.
And there was a time when I've been exercising every day for years, but there was a time when I ate very differently, where no matter how much I exercised, I was still gaining weight. And it was because of what I was eating. But when I cut out the pasta and the rice and the bread and sticking mainly to salads and, some protein, I'm keeping the weight off. First of all, I dropped my weight quite a bit, and it stays very constant now. Yeah. So, diet, exercise, and good thinking. Those are the keys to a long, healthy life.
That's what's up. Yeah. I did want to ask you maybe one last question about your MIDI wind controller. So you're playing on an iwi.
That's the Akai, right? Mm-hmm.
Right. And I have owned 2, maybe 3 different iwis. I don't own an iwi now. I had a Yamaha WX5 for a period of time. I really liked that because it had actual keys on it, but I didn't like that it was like a kind of a different fingering system. I liked the Akai for the I think for the roller, as far as like the register. But then Roland put out that the AE10 Aerophone. And of the things that are out, other than Yamaha just put out it kind of looks weird. It looks like some kind of Frankenstein. It looks like an electronic thing with a soprano saxophone bell on it. But it has all of the actual key work, like a saxophone. Right. But it doesn't have the sort of extra register. It just has one register above, and then like if you were playing Barry, like where the low A would be, it has something there. Right. And the sounds that it seems like it comes with are not as electronic. It's more like they're trying to simulate like actual saxophone, right. And it has MIDI out, and so you could access some of those sounds, but none of that stuff is actually on board. Right. whereas the Roland has all the key work of a saxophone, but also has the multiple octave range, and then it has more of the sort of synth kind of sounds. Have you played on any of the other MIDI wind controllers?
I've tried the Roland. I also tried the Yamaha WX5. I didn't care for the Yamaha. The WX5 didn't respond well. The thing I like most about the Akai is it really responds quick, you know. If you're using the internal sounds, the whole key is to get good internal sounds. And the sounds I use were programmed by a guy named Matt Traum at Patchman Music.
Yeah, that's where I got mine from. Yeah.
Yeah, that's he's the cat. You know, I use his sounds verbatim. That's what
I think he's in Akron, right? Akron, Ohio.
Is it Cleveland or near Cleveland?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We play when we play Nighttown in Cleveland. He comes out. I think he's near Cleveland. And I don't know. Anyway, and the thing I like about the Akai is just the immediacy. You know, being that it takes a minute to get used to no movable keys, but by the same token, you can be very light and facile when you don't have to move anything, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you know, what I find I have to do with that Akai is I have to articulate a lot. I mean, I'm double tonguing, just to facilitate legato. And anyway, I mean, like if you're playing on a saxophone, you're articulating a fair amount, you know, just to vary the sound and the texture of each note. So, I mean, I've been playing it now for 30 years. I started playing that Akai when I joined the Yellow Jackets. I'm pretty at home there. I think the Roland there might be something there too. I haven't given up on that yet. I've sort of been messing around with that a little bit too.
Yeah, they all are a little bit different. What it seemed to me was that the Aerophone seems to be a combination of things. Like it seems like it's there's some things that are more like the Iwi on it. There's some things that are sort of like the WX5. It has actual keys.
Right.
And it has like that little fake reed on it, and you can use that. I always turn that thing off. I don't want that, because you have like there's like a little joystick by it's by the right hand where you can do pitch bends and stuff. So I kind of don't want to mess with that because I'm just too concerned about playing out of tune, you know?
Yeah, there's that. I mean, the thing about the Akai is if you don't, you instigate vibrato by biting on this rubber mouthpiece thing. So if you don't bite, the pitch is constant.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and I really need that vibrato. For example, I might bite on there at the end of a note, like a boop. You know, you can get certain effects, and vibrato I use a lot. You know, I mean sparingly, but I use it consistently, shall we say?
Right.
Anyway, for me, the objective is to make that instrument, whatever electronic instrument it is, be expressive, and sound, like the human voice, not like a keyboard. You don't want note on, note off. You want to be able to have flexibility with volume and timbre and expression.
Yeah.
Right. So that's partially the instrument and partially the programming, the sounds, how they respond to breath velocity.
I have this one plug-in for my computer. So, and this would work with anything that was MIDI, but I use it with it. So, it's like a harmony, like calculator. Like I can play one note.
Right.
And it will trigger several notes to play at the same time.
Right.
And you can program it to sort of randomly select from different voicings, so it doesn't sound like you're doing the same thing all the time.
Right.
And I haven't programmed this yet, but you can, in conjunction with like a foot pedal, you can actually tell it to call up different programs, and the different programs could actually be different chords or something, you know.
Right.
So like if I know I'm going to a different kind of chord, I can, you know, I can hit that, you know, second button or something when I
Right.
go to the bridge or something. And now all this stuff that I'm playing is inside that key, but it's also randomly selecting from these different voicings.
Right. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, the EWI 1000 had that functionality, and we used to play this tune with the jackets where I would play chords.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of possibility there for sure.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. I'm a little bit of a no, I'm a lot of a gear I'm a lot of a gear nerd.
Okay.
So I have probably like I have way too much gear, and of course there's not enough time to do anything with the gear, and I could just sit around and just you know, like I'm not really practicing, but I'm just like playing around with a bunch of stuff. I love to do that. You know, I tell my students this all the time. I don't like practicing very much. I practice a lot because I have to, you know, in order to get where I'm trying to go. But I love to fart around. I could sit in the room and just mess around with stuff for a long time.
Yeah.
Didn't accomplish anything, but I had a lot of fun doing it.
You know, the pandemic has really, I think, pushed a lot of people into technology that they might not normally have broached. I know in my case, you know, I was always really invested in writing, arranging, you know, facilitating playing situations for live playing. And now that none of that is happening, through my teaching and whatever remote recording I'm doing, I've pretty much been pushed into learning Logic and remote recording. And I've did a couple of remote big band recordings where I assembled all individual parts and, you know, learned Logic, you know, how to mix and edit things and all that, you know, which it's been pretty interesting, I have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any final words?
Oh, final words. Just grateful to have music in my life. And anybody that's interested in playing music, you know, I urge you to stay with it, to work on it, to try to play the music you hear in your head and feel in your heart, to keep an open mind, to look far and wide for inspiration and ideas, and, you know, and to enjoy, because it's such a wonderful connection to the spirit, to humanity, to other people. It's just, you know, it's an indescribable thing when everything lines up and you connect musically in a setting. There's just nothing like it. It's the most incredible thing. So, and I believe music and art is really the answer to bringing people together. And, you know, when the arts kind of wane and go away out of a culture or society, things go left. And I think we need to keep arts and humanities front and center, you know, and particularly music. I mean, it's well documented that music, you know, has a very positive effect on the brain, but also on, you know, people's sense of well-being and spirituality. So there's every reason in the world to be involved with music in whatever capacity.
Yeah, and especially instrumental music, right? Because there's nothing to disagree about. It's just emotion and
Right. Mm-hmm.
and color and beauty and virtuosity and and all of this great stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Sean.
Yeah, for doing the show, and we'll have to have you back sometime. Maybe like way after the pandemic is over or something, so we can compare notes.
It would be my pleasure. It was really fun to talk to you, and thanks for everything you're doing, by the way.
You got it, man. Well, God bless you.
All right, back at you. Take care.
All right now.
Bye.